Well, it's morning and I'm not a morning person, but I just wanted to give a little intro to the video. I originally thought all of the gauges would be on one video, and so I included a lot of the speedometer stuff in the one I did on the fuel gauge. So this is the rest of it, and it shows you the finished product, and I hope you enjoy. On the back of the speedometer, I made this piece to hold it in place, very much like I did on the other gauges. But it just wasn't working for me because this isn't as deep as the other ones, and the screws actually protruded out too far. And what I found I could do is it was worse on the bottom than the top, so I wound up just cutting the bottom portion off and using the top. And these screws do, when they're fully tightened, they do go below that level, which is good. And it means though that this isn't really that tight in there, but it will tighten up when I put the when I sandwich the LED board in there. That'll tighten it up in the downward direction. And if it's still not quite good enough, what I could do is put like a foam spacer in here to push it flat against the front, so that you know, I want to make sure that that seats against the little lip that's in the front, right? So that's kind of the plan. It's not ideal, but I think it's kind of working for me. I need this piece for support for the LED light. As with most speedometers, this speedometer is equipped with an odometer that has a little button that you can press to reset. And in this case, it's attached to this sort of plastic structure here that I've cut away already. And it has this little contraption they built here that just moves it over to where the actual switch is, which is just under here. So on the other speedometer that I had, I went ahead and desoldered that. Because I assumed, when I looked at it, it looked like it was just a simple switch, which I think it actually is. I have put it on the end of a couple of cables so I could remote mount it. And now, if I press the button, you can see I get a resistance. Interestingly, this often it changes. The resistance actually changes every time I press it. So let me try that again. Yeah, I was getting like 50 ohms before, but I tried it both ways. I think it's just a simple switch. There's just a little bit of resistance in it for some reason. But because it was easily removed from the board, I think I can remote mount that, because in the gauge itself, I have really no place to mount it. I mean, the most convenient place would be right around here, but I don't want it to come out in the middle of the numbers. Here's a spot that's open, but it's not real convenient on the actual dial, and the same thing down here where I'm there's not a lot of way to come out. I'm not sure what I'd mount it on. Maybe I could come off here and then mount the switch or something, but I think that I'm going to wind up having two of those because I have two odometers, and I'd be able to essentially have four different trips then, because each one has two. So I think I'm going to remote mount both of those, and I'll just come up with my own little structure somewhere outside of the speedometer. That'll keep the speedometer simple for removal here, and I wouldn't have to drill any holes in either the plate or the backing decorative backing plate. I'll just run it out the back with the rest of the wires, and I'll have them come up to the dashboard somewhere where I'll put the two buttons. Alright, so right here I've remote mounted the two switches. I've just run some wires out the back, and they'll connect to the appropriate color gray or purple wires later here outside of the speedometer. So remote mounting these switches is going quite nicely. Not like my ill-conceived idea to remote mount the LED on my Bluetooth module. I don't want to talk about it. So I really only have two things left to do to finish the speedometer now that I've gotten to this point. One is to drill the holes in this bezel, which really scares me because it's very hard to hit the center of a hole, and I want them to line up so that the bezel doesn't sit on the housing, you know, crooked or something. And the other is to come up with a back plate. I don't actually have one, so that means I'm going to have to go to the CNC, I think, and I'll cut out a piece a little bit like this, probably out of Kydex again. I was thinking about using aluminum, but there's some stuff in the back that could short out if I do that. So I'll cut a piece like this, and I'll have a grommet, a hole for a grommet at the bottoms where the wires can come through, and then I can just finish assembly on that. Alright, so I cut the 2 back pieces out on the CNC, and as you can see, this particular material comes out a little fuzzy looking. So I'll just clean these pieces up and then finish assembling the speedometer. That's better. I even installed the grommets. So it goes against my nature to not put some kind of a strain relief in there, because I'm afraid that if I'm pulling on these cables when I'm installing it or something like that, it'll pull internal to the unit, pull something off. I mean, this is only soldered and then hot glued in place as a strain relief. These have a zip tie, but it's a straight run basically out. The grommet itself will add a little bit of resistance, but so I tied these knots hoping that when you pull on them, they'll bump against the grommet and not want to come out. And it's not the greatest, but if I'm careful, I think it'll be all right. And then to hold this unit in, there's a little bit of space back here. I think I'm going to put in this piece of foam, and it may be too big, so I'll see. If it is, then I may have to put something thinner in. Also, the back of the unit is a little bit flexible, so it may have a little bump there. So we'll see, but that's kind of the plan. I'll pull those wires through and then button it up. I'm so very proud to say that the speedometer is now basically done. I mean, I have to put the cover on, but once I put the cover on, you know, you won't be able to see it. I just wanted to show you what the finished product looked like. The wiring's all done. The ring will hold that on when I put it together. The back looks great. I think it's not super well strain relieved, but I think it's good enough. I really think that a general amount of tugging on it's not going to do any real damage, and I think it's looking really good, so hopefully you do too. Alright, there you have it. There are 6 holes that I had to drill. Can you guess how many of them lined up? Well, if you guess 5, you get the prize. Something I didn't mention about the speedometer on the car is that I didn't lay out the speedometer exactly like this with this spacing, because the tires on my car are smaller than came on the donor car, so it's going to spin a little bit faster. And what I did was I calculated the difference between the rotations on my car and the rotations on the donor car, and I came up with a different spread for the one I made. The problem is I'm not sure that I got it right, because what the manual calls out for the number of pulses you get for a certain speed didn't match what I measured on my O-scope. So I took what I measured on my O-scope and trusted that. Worst case scenario is, as I drive, if it's too far off, I'll have to make a new design and have it basically laser etched and replace the one that's in there now. Well, thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed that. The next gauge is going to be the tachometer. I'm mostly done with that, and it was a little bit more challenging, and if you watch the next video, you'll see why. Thank you.